all of Sam's lyrics contain love, okay? Why can't this be love? And I ain't talking about love.
Imagine being in a band sitting right at the top of the world. Everything's going perfect, fame everywhere, and you think nothing could ever go wrong. But then egos start clashing so bad that you end up firing the very face of the band, the lead singer himself. And instead of playing it safe, you bring in a brand new singer and flip the band's entire sound upside down. It was a bold, almost reckless move. But somehow it worked, at least for a while. How could any band possibly pull that off? Simple. They made some smart plays long before the chaos hit. Way back in the early days, Van Halen almost got completely screwed. When they were just a hungry new act trying to break through, they signed one of the worst record deals you could imagine with Warner Brothers. This deal basically chained them for life.
Michael Anthony is top 5 rock and roll bass player in the world. Any bass player will tell you that, any musician will tell you that.
Warner Brothers could renew their contract every 2 years on the same terrible terms, forever. But the band was desperate to make it, so they signed without pushing for better terms. No lawyer tricks, no second thoughts, just pure excitement to get their big break. After their first major tour, the band brought in a new manager, Noel Monk, a guy who'd been their road manager before. And Monk wasn't messing around. His first mission, get Van Halen out of that nightmare deal. And wow, he came up with one slick plan to do it. He started drowning Warner Brothers in non-stop paperwork, constant requests for royalties, accounting breakdowns, contract clarifications, just endless stuff. He hit them so hard with documents that the execs at Warner Brothers were losing their minds. Monk was playing chess, not checkers. He knew they'd eventually get so overwhelmed they'd slip up, and that's exactly what happened. Warner Brothers missed the renewal deadline buried under all that paperwork. That's when Monk marched straight into Mo Austin's office, the head of Warner Brothers, and told him the wild news. Van Halen, their biggest act, was now a free agent. Just like that, the band that had been trapped under a shady contract was suddenly free to take full control of their career. From that moment, Van Halen wasn't just a band. They were a business powerhouse. They were making millions, calling their own shots, and no longer tied to an unfair lifetime deal. But freedom came with a twist. Warner Brothers now had the option to either accept or reject Van Halen's next album. The label had to believe the band was still hot, still worth the investment. But come on, by that point, Van Halen was already proven. If Warner Brothers said no, any other label would have snatched them up instantly. The ball was in Van Halen's court, and they finally had the leverage they'd always dreamed of. Still, even with the success and freedom, there was a storm brewing inside the band. The tension between Eddie Van Halen and David Lee Roth had been simmering from the start. Their personalities couldn't be more different. Eddie was the quiet genius, a guitar magician focused on the music. Roth? He was the wild showman, loud, flashy, and addicted to the spotlight. He knew Eddie's talent was on another level, but Roth wanted to be the voice and face of Van Halen, the rock star everyone talked about.
Michael Anthony is a bad motherfucker. Fuck you, Eddie Van Halen, for saying that about Mikey.
That mix of brilliance and ego made the band explosive and unforgettable. Roth absolutely owned his role as frontman, his confidence, his voice, his stage presence. It all just clicked. The chemistry between him and the rest of Van Halen was electric, and that magic helped rocket them straight to the top. But once the fame hit full blast, something started changing. Roth's ego began to blow up big time. He started acting like he was the band, even thinking he was more important than Eddie himself. And backing him up in this power trip, none other than their producer, Ted Templeman. Things took a sharp turn during the Diver Down era. The band had just wrapped up the Fair Warning tour, an album that showed off Eddie's insane guitar skills but didn't sell as strong as expected. The label started breathing down their necks, demanding a hit summer single. So they covered Pretty Woman, and boom, it blew up. But success came with pressure, Warner Brothers. demanded a full album right after. During those sessions, Roth's ego went from big to out of control. He became the main attraction, the center of every spotlight, and it started rubbing the Van Halen brothers the wrong way fast. By the time they began working on 1984, Eddie had had enough. He decided to take matters into his own hands, literally. He built his own home studio in his backyard and started recording much of the new material solo. This was Eddie's way of seizing control of the band's sound once and for all. He wanted to experiment, especially with synthesizers, which was a huge shift for the group. Roth and Templeman hated the idea. They thought fans only wanted to hear Eddie shredding guitar solos. But Eddie stuck to his vision. And because it was his studio, there wasn't much they could do to stop him. When 1984 finally dropped, Eddie's instincts proved dead on. It was a massive success. But even with the victory, the tension only got worse. Roth started losing patience with the slow production pace and began plotting his own solo career, and even a movie project. He really thought he was bigger than the band now. Meanwhile, Eddie's guest guitar spot on Michael Jackson's Beat It added even more heat to their rivalry. The question hanging in the air was loud and clear. Whose band was it really? Roth's or the Van Halen brothers? And honestly, when the band's name is Van Halen, the answer kinda speaks for itself. Things were shifting behind the scenes too, especially for bassist Michael Anthony. During the 1984 sessions, Eddie started playing most of the bass parts himself. Michael would show up to the studio only to find Eddie and Alex had already laid everything down. And when he did get to record, Eddie would often change the parts later anyway. Word got around that Eddie and engineer Don Landy would stay up all night tweaking tracks, completely coked out of their minds, as people put it, redoing bass lines or replacing them entirely. Eddie liked to keep the bass simple under his solos, so Michael's creative input started shrinking fast. To make things worse, Michael wasn't getting much credit in the songwriting either, which meant less money coming his way. His pay got restructured, slashed down, even though he still showed up, kept playing, and kept the band's sound tight on stage. But deep down, he was getting fed up too. It was just a matter of time before that loyalty wore thin. And then came the biggest challenge yet, replacing David Lee Roth. The band scrambled to find the right voice to fill those wild shoes. They tried out several singers, Eric Martin, who later fronted Mr. Big, Jimmy Barnes, and even Patti Smith from Scandal. They even shot their shot with Daryl Hall, who laughed it off, saying, before Eddie's mechanic recommended Sammy Hagar. And that's when everything changed again. Then came Sammy Hagar, the one and only Red Rocker. His entrance into Van Halen wasn't some carefully planned move. It was pure rock and roll coincidence. Eddie's mechanic, who worked on both Eddie's Lamborghini and Sammy's Ferrari, was the unexpected link between the two legends. One day, Eddie spotted Sammy's flashy red Ferrari in the shop and asked, "Yo, whose car is that?" The mechanic grinned and said it belonged to Sammy Hagar, then added, "You should get him in your band." That one offhand comment changed everything. Right there in the shop, Eddie grabbed Sammy's number from the mechanic and called him on the spot. Just like that, a whole new Van Halen era began. But when Sammy joined, the band was in total chaos behind the scenes. No manager, no record deal, nothing locked down. The music they made next would decide whether Van Halen even had a future. Sammy walked into a storm. The creative fire was still there, but the business side, completely wrecked after Roth's exit. So the guys locked themselves away and secretly started recording what would become the iconic 51-50 album. Hardly anyone even knew Sammy had joined yet. Eddie played most of the bass on the record, and by the time the album was about 90% done, they hadn't even signed with a label. That's when Sammy's manager, Ed Leffler, came into play, and man, he worked magic. He stepped up to manage Van Halen, And with a nearly finished record in hand, he used that to score the band a killer new deal. Since Van Halen were free agents, Loeffler had all the leverage. On top of that, he even managed to get Sammy out of his old record contract so he could go full throttle with the band. Talk about smooth business moves. 50 marked a total transformation for Van Halen. With Roth gone and Sammy stepping in as frontman, everything changed. The sound, the vibe, even the energy on stage. The album title itself was wild. It came from the California Police Code for a mentally disturbed person, and it was also the name of Eddie's home studio where the whole thing was recorded. Sammy and the band instantly clicked, vibing hard from the very first session. By July 1985, they were deep in creation mode, hammering out fresh tracks that would redefine what Van Halen sounded like. The recording sessions for 50 were intense. No breaks, no nonsense. Just pure grind for 3 straight months. Things got so heated that at one point engineer Don Landy literally locked himself in the studio and threatened to burn the tapes. The tension was insane, but thankfully cooler heads prevailed, and the album made it out alive. Gone was longtime producer Ted Templeman, though he still helped sequence the track list. This time, Foreigner guitarist Mick Jones stepped in as producer, giving the band a sleeker, more radio-friendly pop edge, especially on keyboard-heavy songs like Love Walks In and Dreams. You could hear the difference right away. The mix was cleaner, the sound more polished, and Eddie's guitar tone had evolved big time. Instead of being hard-panned to the left like before, his guitar now sat evenly in the mix, crisp, bright, and layered with subtle chorus effects. And those keyboards? Way more prominent than ever before. Some die-hard fans didn't love it. They missed Eddie's raw, organic tone from the early days. But there was no denying it. 51. 50 showed that Van Halen wasn't just surviving without Roth. They were reinventing themselves all over again. The sound of 50 leaned hard into that slick pop rock vibe. And it worked perfectly for the new direction Van Halen was chasing. Sammy Hagar brought a whole new energy to the studio. He didn't overthink the lyrics. He'd just vibe with the band, freestyling words on the spot while they jammed. Despite the crazy pressure of proving this new lineup could survive after Roth's exit, the guys were having the time of their lives in the studio, laughing, experimenting, and building something totally fresh. They tackled songs one by one, with Sammy laying down vocals right there in the booth as Eddie and Alex shaped the sound around him. If you look closely at the original 50 vinyl, there's a little hidden detail. Etched right under the label are the words, "Play Me Loud." That sums up the whole record perfectly. Even the album cover screamed New Era. It showed an Art Deco-style atlas holding up a mirrored globe, with a revamped Van Halen logo shining on top. Gone were the instrumental tracks of old. This album was all about power, emotion, and hooks. And for the first time, Van Halen dropped some of their longest songs ever. Only Why Can't This Be Love came in under 4 minutes. When Warner Brothers execs finally came in to hear the new music, the band didn't play the whole album. Nope, they just hit play on Why Can't This Be Love, right there in the studio, loud and live. As soon as the song ended, label chairman Mo Austin couldn't hold back. He jumped up and shouted, "I smell money." And he wasn't wrong. 51. 50 became Van Halen's first ever #1 album on the Billboard charts, proving once and for all that the band could crush it even without Roth. Within just 2 months, it went multi-platinum. The Van Hagar era had officially arrived, and it was on fire. When they hit the road for the 51-50 tour, everything changed again. The band leaned hard into their new material, barely touching the Roth-era songs. Instead, the set list was packed with tracks from 50, 150, mixed with a few of Sammy's solo hits and some surprise cover tunes. The concerts were explosive, high energy, bigger stages, and a totally new vibe. Sammy's personal favorite song off the album, Dreams, almost didn't make the cut until producer Mick Jones convinced them to record it, and it ended up becoming a timeless anthem. The song later popped up in movie soundtracks and even got used as John Kerry's campaign theme song during the 2004 election. Talk about lasting impact. Fun fact, the original working title of 50 won. 50 was Best of Both Worlds. That song was meant to be the album's title track before they switched it up. Eddie once again handled most of the bass duties himself during the sessions, refining every detail of the record. And get this, in the late 80s, the U.S. Navy Blue Angels even used 5150 as their entrance music for air show performances. That's how hard this album hit. It became part of American rock culture, even though critics at first were divided, some loving the new sound, others still mourning the old Van Halen. Over time, 50 won. 50 earned massive respect. It's now seen as one of the band's tightest, most cohesive albums ever. The 50 tour, though, stayed mostly in North America. The setup was huge, the gear was heavy, and Sammy wanted to prove himself on home turf before taking it worldwide. The first leg covered the U.S., while the second and third added a few Canadian stops. Sammy Hagar made one thing crystal clear when he joined Van Halen. He wasn't going to sing just anything from the old days. He agreed to perform only the biggest, most iconic songs from the Roth era. But there was one track he completely refused to touch, Jump. Sammy straight up said he thought Dave's lyrics on it were pretty much crap, and he didn't want to go anywhere near it. So when the band did decide to play Jump live, they kept it instrumental, letting the crowd belt out the words while the band just jammed behind them. It actually became a cool moment at shows, with fans taking over the vocals and the band turning it into a massive sing-along event. The live shows also introduced something fans went crazy for, a full-on guitar duel between Eddie and Sammy. They'd go head-to-head on stage, trading licks and solos, showing off just how in sync they'd become. And to close out every night, they'd rip into Led Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, a perfect high-energy finish. On select tour dates across Canada, Van Halen brought out some serious homegrown talent, too. Rock legends like Bachman Turner Overdrive, Loverboy, and Kim Mitchell joined in to open shows in cities like Rochester and Niagara Falls, adding even more fire to those massive outdoor gigs. But the 50 tour wasn't all smooth sailing. Behind the scenes, the band faced some rough moments. Their manager, Ed Loeffler, ended up hospitalized in Texas after a freak accident in a hotel elevator. Even worse, Eddie's wife, actress Valerie Bertinelli, suffered a miscarriage during the tour, something she hadn't even told Eddie about until it was too late. It was a heartbreaking moment in what was otherwise one of the band's biggest highs. Still, Van Halen kept charging forward, selling out arenas, breaking records, and proving the Van Hagar era was unstoppable. Sammy even joked, "We were selling records faster than they could print them. Every single show was a sellout, pure madness." One unforgettable moment came when the band filmed their explosive concert at the New Haven Coliseum. The show was broadcast live on TV and later released on VHS as Live Without a Net. It became a fan favorite, showing off the band's crazy chemistry and raw energy during that tour. By the time the final show hit, November 3, 1986, at the Cow Palace, things got wild behind the scenes. Eddie decided to switch up his look, chopping his hair into a long, braided rat tail, while Alex took it even further and shaved his head completely. The running joke was that the whole band was supposed to shave their heads by the end of the tour, but Michael Anthony didn't have much hair left to begin with, and Sammy backed out last second, laughing that he wasn't about to ruin his look. Then came OU-812 in 1988, Van Halen's highly anticipated follow-up. The title, Classic Sammy Humor. He spotted a delivery truck with the code OU-812 stenciled on the side, cracked up, and said, "That should be our next album name." The band loved it and ditched their original title idea, Bones, at the very last minute. Just like before, the songs for OU-812 came together fast and naturally through pure jamming. The lead single, When It's Love, was born when Sammy overheard Eddie and Alex working on a piano and drum part. He started freestyling lyrics right there on the spot, and by the time they hit the studio, the song was basically done. That's the kind of chemistry they had, spontaneous, effortless, and full of fire. Other tracks had equally wild origins. Cabo Wabo came straight from Sammy's love for Cabo San Lucas, Mexico, a place that would later become part of his brand and lifestyle. And Finish What You Started came from a late-night jam session at Sammy's house, just him and Eddie riffing until sunrise. The OU-812 album leaned even more into a polished pop rock sound, showing a smoother, glossier side of Van Halen. The production had a late 80s shine that made it sound a bit more dated over time, but the songwriting, still top-notch. Songs like When It's Love carried that same heartfelt vibe as their earlier hit ballads. Proof that even with a softer touch, Van Halen could still crush the charts. Love Comes Walking In showed Van Halen's softer, more melodic side. But Finish What You Started, that track was something totally different. Eddie Van Halen flipped the script with a clean, twangy guitar tone, snapping strings with a chicken-picking style that no one expected from a rock god like him. The solo section broke down beautifully. The band dropped out and Eddie slid right into this slick, country-influenced groove that sounded raw, playful, and completely unique. It was proof that Eddie wasn't just a shredder. He was fearless, ready to experiment and still swinging for the fences every single time. By this point, Van Halen had mastered the art of writing hooks that stuck in your head for days. OU-812 was packed with them, the kind of melodies that had fans humming long after the music stopped. Mine All Mine brought a darker, more intense edge, a sound that hinted at the heavier tone the band would chase later on for unlawful carnal knowledge and balance. It had a tight, driving groove, and that chorus, layered with low and high octave harmonies, gave it a cool, modern polish that made it sound ahead of its time. Then there's Black and Blue, a total fan favorite from the Van Hagar years. It rolled with a laid-back swagger, groovy, confident, and built around a killer main riff. And when the solo hit, Eddie just torched the fretboard, pure lightning, but not every track aged perfectly. Sammy later admitted that Source of Infection had some goofy, drunken lyrics, literally made up on the spot in the studio. He laughed about it years later, saying he didn't even remember recording some of it. But hey, that wasn't the first time. Even Inside from 5150 carried that same wild half-improv vibe that only Sammy could pull off when he was in the zone. On the softer side, Feels So Good leaned heavy into pop territory, catchy and smooth, but according to the band, a little too shiny. Only Eddie and Sammy were really into it, calling it one of their guilty pleasures. But the real hidden gem on OU-812, Apolitical Blues. It was gritty, raw, and recorded with this smoky, distant mic setup that gave it an old-school bar band energy. For once, Van Halen sounded like they were jamming in a tiny club instead of a massive arena. And it worked. Sammy's bluesy growl and Eddie's stripped-down playing gave it this down-and-dirty charm that fans still talk about. Honestly, it would have been amazing if the band had done a whole album in that same gritty style. Even though OU-812 had a few uneven moments, it showed off just how locked in the band was with Sammy during that era. The chemistry was electric, the creativity was flowing, and they were still pushing boundaries while keeping that Van Halen spirit alive. To support the record, the band hit the road again in 1988 with one of the most stacked tours of the decade, the Monsters of Rock Tour. And the lineup? Unreal. You had Metallica, the Scorpions, Dokken, and Kingdom Come all sharing the stage, a dream bill for any rock fan. It was a wild time, especially for Metallica. It was their first major tour since the tragic death of bassist Cliff Burton, and fans were fired up to see Jason Newsted step in and carry the torch. Metallica came out swinging with the raw energy of "And Justice for All," tearing up every show they played. The Scorpions were their usual powerhouse selves, and Dokken brought that polished 80s arena rock sound that fit right in. But the real talk of the tour, Kingdom Come. They got hit hard with criticism back then, accused of sounding too much like Led Zeppelin, almost like an 80s remake of Physical Graffiti-era Zeppelin. The Monsters of Rock tour wasn't just another run-of-the-mill roadshow. It was a full-blown rock carnival. The band rolled out a custom-built stage, cutting-edge lighting rigs, and a sound system so powerful it could shake the ground beneath you. Promoter Louis Messina was the mastermind behind it all. He pitched Van Halen on this massive 5-band summer tour, and the guys were all in from the start. But going that big came with a price, literally. The tour cost a fortune to pull off, and even though some cities packed out stadiums, others struggled with attendance. By the end, it was considered a financial flop. Too expensive, too ambitious, and maybe just a bit ahead of its time. Some blamed it on the newer songs not being as familiar to casual fans, while others pointed out that many of the shows fell on school nights, not exactly ideal for a heavy rock crowd. And if that wasn't enough drama, Sammy Hagar had his own rough moment on stage. During a show in East Troy, he slipped during the opening song and cracked his tailbone. But instead of calling it quits, Sammy just laughed it off and powered through the whole concert in pain. Pure rock dedication right there. Fast forward a bit to March 1991, a huge moment for Eddie Van Halen's life. That's when his son, Wolfgang Van Halen, was born. And it didn't take long to see that music was in that kid's DNA. Even as a little guy, Wolfgang was sitting behind the drums, learning directly from Uncle Alex, and picking up guitar, bass, basically anything he could touch. He grew up surrounded by music, and today he can perfectly capture his dad's tone and groove whenever he wants to. Way more authentic than any of those wannabe Van Halen copycats out there. After Wolfgang's arrival came a brand new Van Halen era, and a seriously bold statement with their next record, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. The album itself hit hard. It was heavier, darker, and tighter than their last few records. The band started using ambient mics all around the studio to capture Alex's thunderous drum sound, and you could feel the power in every beat. Alex had been chasing that deep, chest-rattling bottom tone for years, and this time he nailed it. He was a total perfectionist. He'd spend hours in the studio tweaking mic placements and EQs, driving engineers insane. But when you hear the final result, it was all worth it. The drums on this record hit like cannons. Producer Ted Templeman made his big return to the Van Halen camp for this one, sharing duties with legendary engineer Andy Johns, who also handled some of the production work. Don Landy was still around too, taking care of the mastering side of things. Andy worked wonders getting Michael Anthony's bass tone just right, warm, punchy, and finally standing out in the mix instead of getting buried like before. But not everyone vibed with him. Sammy Hagar, for one, couldn't stand working with Andy. He stuck close to Ted Templeman, who had more of a hands-off approach and let Sammy do his thing without too much interference. This record also marked a new era for Eddie's gear setup. For the first time, he ditched his legendary Marshall Super Lead amp. Instead, he switched to a 1989 Soldano SLO 100. which gave him a fatter, richer sound. And on top of that, he started experimenting with what would become the prototype for his own 50 series custom amps. The tone Eddie achieved here was unreal, a perfect blend of the old, raw Van Halen bite and the cleaner, more controlled sound of the 90s. It was pure fire. And of course, Eddie being Eddie, he couldn't resist bringing some of his wild tricks back. He even pulled out the power drill again for Pound Cake, turning it into a screaming guitar weapon years before anyone else thought to do it. That wild drill effect on Pound Cake blew fans' minds, and it actually caught the attention of other guitar heroes too. Paul Gilbert later used a similar trick, but Eddie made it iconic first. And tucked among the hard rock anthems on For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge was something softer, an instrumental masterpiece called 316. It's one of Eddie's most emotional pieces, named after his newborn son, Wolfgang, whose birthday is March 16th. Eddie had written and played parts of it even before Wolfgang was born, but once his son arrived, he rededicated the song to him. It's simple, tender, and pure Eddie, a beautiful side of his genius that showed the heart behind all the guitar firepower. Then came Top of the World, one of Van Halen's biggest hits from the Hagar years. What's wild is that the main chord progression actually came from the fade-out section of Jump. Before that, it had even been tacked onto Dance the Night Away. 3 different songs, 1 recycled riff. Eddie was a master at that. He could take a tiny idea from years before and turn it into something totally new and unforgettable. That creative recycling gave Van Halen's sound this sense of continuity, like the band was always evolving but never forgetting where they came from. Another cool twist on this album. Eddie ditched the heavy synths that had defined 50, 50, and OU 812, and went back to a more organic piano sound. It gave the record a timeless feel, cleaner and more grounded. Songs like Judgment Day came roaring out of the gate, pure, hard-hitting Van Halen energy. Then there's Spanked, a dirty, funky jam built around a low-tuned guitar and some sharp, punchy stabs from Eddie that gave it this sleazy swagger. It had that same hypnotic groove fans loved from Drop Dead Legs, the kind of song that just locks you in and refuses to let go. Eddie's solo on Pleasure Dome reminded everyone that he was still a monster of a shredder. His picking was razor sharp, clean, fast, and bursting with precision. The dude made it sound effortless. Then Man on a Mission came swinging in with this chaotic, bluesy intro that exploded into pure Van Halen strut. Big riffs, bold energy, and that unstoppable confidence. Eddie's playing during this era was untouchable, smooth, explosive, and always inventive. The song Right Now became another massive hit, blending piano and guitar in a way that perfectly captured both sides of Eddie's talent. Alex came in hard on drums, giving it that signature Van Halen punch. The track's message, about living in the moment, struck a chord with fans everywhere, and its powerful video became one of the band's most recognizable moments ever. For many fans of the Hagar era, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge was the ultimate Van Halen album, the perfect blend of musicianship, emotion, and attitude. The record didn't just dominate the charts. It won the 1992 Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance with Vocal, marking another huge victory for the band. Just like 1984, it showed Van Halen could deliver an album that was both commercially massive and musically solid from start to finish. Every song hit hard, and there wasn't a single weak link in the lineup. The tour that followed, though, had some legendary moments of its own. In true Sammy fashion, he decided to keep a promise he'd made years earlier, and it cost the band a fortune. Back in 1988, during a Texas Jam concert, Sammy had been forced to cut the show short because of a sore throat. Feeling guilty, he swore to the crowd that he'd come back and play a free concert someday to make it up to them. 3 years later, in 1991, he actually did it. Van Halen threw a massive free concert in the West End of Dallas, Texas, and about 60,000 fans showed up. It was total chaos, loud, wild, and pure Texas energy. The crowd was packed tight, and things got so rowdy that a few people got trampled. One woman even broke a rib, but emergency crews were on site and got her help fast. Other than that, there were just 3 minor arrests. Not bad considering how huge and crazy the crowd was. But the real shocker? That free show cost Van Halen a whopping $100,000 out of pocket. The band laughed about it later, joking that Sammy's big heart came with a very expensive price tag. Still, they kept their word, and the Dallas crowd never forgot it. After the explosive success of For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, Van Halen kept their momentum going with a live double album, Live Right Here, Right Now. It captured the band in full force, roaring through stadium anthems and proving they were still one of the tightest acts in rock. But behind all that energy, things were starting to crack. Eddie had mostly stepped back from playing keyboards during the shows, handing that job off to Alan Fitzgerald from Night Ranger. Eddie wanted to focus on his guitar, and man, it showed. But while the music stayed powerful, the people behind it were burning out fast. Sammy Hagar, after years of non-stop touring and recording, was exhausted. He'd been running at full speed since the day he joined Van Halen, and the grind was wearing him down. Michael Anthony felt the same way, drained, homesick, and ready for a break. But Eddie and Alex Van Halen, they didn't believe in slowing down, not for a second. They lived for the studio and the stage, always pushing forward. That intensity came at a cost. Both brothers' marriages started to crumble under the pressure. Alex had already been through 3 marriages, and Eddie's relationship with Valerie Bertinelli was starting to fall apart too. By the time they regrouped to make their next album, Balance, the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Something else had changed too. Eddie had gotten sober. After years of heavy drinking, he finally quit cold turkey, and suddenly the creative floodgates opened. He was cranking out song after song, sharp, inspired, and laser-focused. But at the same time, tragedy hit the band hard. Their longtime manager, Ed Loeffler, lost his battle with cancer. He'd been like family to them, especially to Sammy, and his death left a huge hole. According to Hagar, that loss was the turning point, the thing that broke the unity the band once had. Needing someone to fill the gap, the Van Halen brothers brought in Ray Daniels, who'd previously managed Rush. But Sammy immediately had a bad feeling about the guy. He even called around to get some insight. And the feedback wasn't good. Everybody said the same thing, Sammy recalled. They all told me, he's a slime bag. Still, Eddie and Alex were convinced he was the man for the job. They trusted him completely, even when Sammy warned them it would backfire. To make things worse, Sammy heard from people in Rush's camp that Ray had trashed the very band he managed for over 2 decades, calling them washed up and saying if they'd had a decent singer, they might have done better on pop radio. Sammy was stunned. If he'd say that about Rush after 23 years, what's he going to say about us, he thought. The tension exploded fast. Sammy and Alex went from heated arguments to straight-up screaming matches, literally shouting "fuck you" at each other face to face until it nearly turned physical. Adding fuel to the fire, Sammy found out Ray Daniels had negotiated himself a bigger cut than their former manager ever got, and that was the last straw. Sammy refused to agree to it. He felt it was shady and unfair. Ray tried to smooth things over later, calling Sammy to ask what he thought about him possibly managing the band Extreme. But Sammy saw right through it. To him, it was just a weak attempt to kiss up and make peace. He wasn't having it. Meanwhile, the creative chemistry between Eddie and Sammy, once effortless, was falling apart. Eddie, now sober and hyper-focused, started nitpicking lyrics and stepping into territory he'd always left alone before. Up until then, he'd let Sammy handle the words however he wanted, but during the balance sessions, Eddie was all over the lyrics, questioning lines, pushing rewrites, and challenging Sammy on his choices. The constant back and forth drained what little patience either of them had left. Still, somehow, through all the chaos, Van Halen managed to pull off one of their strongest records of the Hagar era. They brought in Bruce Fairbairn, one of the biggest names in rock production, the man behind hit albums for Aerosmith, Bon Jovi, and AC/DC. Bruce had a magic touch for turning tension into gold, and even though the band was butting heads non-stop, he kept the sessions on track. Under his direction, Balance became an emotional, intense, and musically powerful album, one that captured every ounce of the turmoil the band was living through. Eddie Van Halen tackled Balance completely sober, and you could feel the difference in every riff, every note, every solo. This album marked a massive turning point, both musically and personally. It was the darkest, most emotional record of the entire Hagar era, the same way Fair Warning had been the shadowy, intense peak of the Roth years. The vibe was heavy, moody, and full of tension, just like the atmosphere inside the band itself. Sammy Hagar later admitted that while they were recording Balance, he already knew the writing was on the wall. "I knew it was over," he said flat out. "They were trying to get rid of me." The opener, the seventh seal, blasted in with monk chants and a thunderous riff that felt like a spiritual awakening mixed with a punch to the gut. It had that same unstoppable energy as Pound Cake, but sharper, darker, and more intense. Eddie's rhythm work was tight and fierce, while Sammy's vocals soared effortlessly into those impossible high notes. Pure power. Then came Can't Stop Loving You, a radio-ready anthem with one of the biggest hooks of Van Halen's entire career. It rode that classic 1-4-6-5 chord progression that dominated late 80s hits, the same pattern you can hear in Kiss's Turn on the Night or 38 Specials' If I'd Been the One. Sure, some hardcore fans called it a little cheesy, but let's be real, it paid the bills and filled arenas. Then things took a hard left turn with Strung Out, one of the strangest and most experimental tracks Van Halen ever released. It dove headfirst into atonal soundscapes, chaotic, eerie, and fascinating. It was Eddie stepping into avant-garde territory, showing a side of his creativity most people never saw. That flowed right into Doin' Time, a full-blown drum showcase by Alex that echoed the tribal groove of John Bonham's Moby Dick mixed with Zeppelin's Zoso Montrose from Coda. Alex was on fire, pounding the kit with that tight, precise swing that only he could pull off. Next came Baluchatherium, an instrumental that simmered with a deep, slow groove, driven by Alex's steady 4/4 pulse and Eddie's soaring guitar melodies. This one sounded like a sneak peek at what an Eddie Van Halen solo album might have been, raw, melodic, and deeply personal. And then there's Amsterdam, one of the most talked about songs on Balance. Sammy wrote it as a tribute to Eddie's birthplace, but it was way more than just a catchy rock tune. It had attitude. The chorus stuck in your head instantly, and Eddie's riffs were intricate, layered, and full of bite. Alex's drumming locked everything together with a funky, off-kilter rhythm that gave the track its edge. Fun fact, Eddie had been sitting on the main riff since at least 1985, maybe even earlier. When it finally made its way onto Balance, it felt like he'd been saving it for the perfect moment. Even the album cover told a story. Those Siamese twins on a seesaw, one trying to break free from the other, perfectly symbolized the band's fractured state. It was a haunting image that echoed the tension within Van Halen itself. And just like 1984, the only other album in their catalog to feature a child on the cover, Balance marked the end of an era. Both albums closed the chapters of their respective lineups, one for Roth, one for Hagar. Around the same time, Van Halen also dipped into soundtrack work, scoring songs for the blockbuster Twister. Their standout contribution, Humans Being, hit like a storm, literally. The verses were heavy, almost metal, while the choruses soared with that signature Van Halen pop edge. Michael Anthony's harmonies lifted the track higher, filling every space with that classic blend only he could deliver. Eddie's solo here was fascinating. It flowed from smooth and melodic into a wild, almost chaotic phrasing that echoed some of the magic from Dreams. It wasn't his flashiest solo ever, but it fit the song perfectly. Sharp, emotional, and cinematic. When Van Halen hit the road to support balance, it quickly earned the nickname the Ambulance Tour. Eddie came up with it himself, and for good reason. Both brothers were in rough shape. Eddie had a serious hip injury, and Alex was suffering from major neck pain. Right when the tour kicked off, Sammy caught a brutal flu that knocked him down hard. They even had to cancel a few early shows because Sammy just couldn't push through it. The whole band was hurting, but they refused to quit. Alex ended up performing in a neck brace, while Eddie, normally bouncing around the stage with wild energy, could barely move, so he spent most nights standing in one spot, just letting the music do the talking. In a surprising twist, this was one of the rare tours where Van Halen actually opened for someone else. They did several overseas dates as the opening act for Bon Jovi, which was a shock to a lot of fans. Back home in North America, though, they were still headlining arenas, bringing along a strong lineup of openers including Collective Soul, Skid Row, and Brother Kane. Even banged up and bruised, Van Halen still put on shows that left crowds speechless. But then came the drama, again. On April 17, 1995, the band had to cancel a show in Oakland for a wild reason. Eddie Van Halen got arrested at Burbank Airport. He tried to board a commercial flight with a loaded .25 caliber pistol in his bag. Eddie was used to flying private, where the rules were looser, and he said he only packed the gun because he'd had some scary encounters over the years. A price of fame, he said. Still, the law's the law. Eddie got a year of probation and a $1,000 fine. It was another chaotic headline in a tour already filled with bumps and bruises. Then came the breaking point. On Father's Day, June 1996, Eddie picked up the phone and called Sammy, not to chat, but to fire him. According to Hagar, Eddie told him straight up that he wasn't doing what the band wanted anymore, that they were arguing too much, and that it was time for him to move on. Eddie also dropped a bombshell. The Van Halen brothers were already working with David Lee Roth again on a couple of new tracks for a greatest hits project. He told Sammy to just focus on being a solo artist instead. Sammy later said that deep down, he believed the brothers were jealous of how well he was doing outside the band. His Cabo Wabo Cantina was booming in Mexico, and his tequila brand was blowing up, eventually becoming a business worth over $150 million. The Van Halen camp wasn't thrilled about that kind of success happening outside their circle. It didn't help that things behind the scenes were tangled in family ties. After longtime manager Ed Loeffler passed away, Eddie and Alex had brought in Ray Daniels. But Ray wasn't just a manager. He was also married to Alex's wife's sister, which meant the family dynamics were getting complicated fast. Sammy didn't trust Ray from the start. He'd heard rumors that Ray was whispering things in the brothers' ears, including a nasty one claiming Sammy made more money off the Live Right Here, Right Now album than the rest of the band. That set Eddie and Alex off, and it only deepened the divide. Ray supposedly stirred things up even more by telling the brothers that Sammy had a solo record deal waiting for him if he decided to leave town, a move that made them furious. The brothers demanded that Sammy pay them back their share and then scrap the solo deal completely. The whole situation went nuclear. Feeling betrayed, drained, and done with all the fighting, Sammy flew out to Hawaii to get some peace and distance, and that's when he got the call. Eddie told him he was officially out. No discussion, no second chances. It was over. Just like that, one of the most successful eras in Van Halen's history came to a close. A lot of fans believe that if Ed Loeffler, the manager who had held everything together for so long, had still been alive, the Van Hagar era might have lasted a few more albums before falling apart. But with him gone, and the constant tension between bandmates, it was only a matter of time before the whole thing exploded. Thank you so much for watching. You all have been incredible. The support, the comments, the knowledge you drop in every video's comment section blows me away. If you learned something new or enjoyed the story, don't forget to smash that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe. I truly appreciate every single one of you. Thank you for being part of this journey, and I'll catch you in the next video.